Hi everyone, welcome again to another Teacher Joseph weekly lesson and video clip. Today we're going to look at a news story about the closure of the Voice of America, and we're going to look at its contribution to learning English because it had its own platform, which is still online at the moment, for learning American English, what it called special English. A few days ago, the American government decided to close the whole thing down. To close down means to terminate or to end. You might think that doesn't affect you, but I think it probably does, because with the closure of VOA, as we call it, Voice of America, it also means that Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia automatically are going to be terminated. So currently, I believe the Prime Minister of Prague or the President of Prague, I don't know who's there. They're currently trying to persuade the European Union to take over or try somehow to manage Radio Free Europe. I'm not sure if that's going to happen because it doesn't belong to them, I don't think. I don't know how it all works, but anyway, the funding for it has been pooled by the American government. So the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and Radio Free Asia are going to be terminated. To be honest with you, as radio broadcasts, probably that needs to happen anyway because they would be very out of date. However, the portals, such as the internet and the web pages and podcasts, all provide useful information. Now, we're not going to get into the politics of the rights and wrongs of this. We're just going to look at VOA's contribution to learning English. So let's have a look, first of all, at one of VOA's pages before it disappears. Right, here we are. So we're just going to have a look at this. So let me just get my act together, as we say in English. Right, you'll see on this page here, special English TV, and it had subtitles. It had a woman speaking in a very slow American accent there. So that was really, really useful. I don't think I can let you hear what she's saying, but if you do want to check that out, you'll find it at learningenglish.voanews.com. And just to show you what else is on here, they had a beginning level, intermediate level, advanced level, of course, something about US history as well. The interesting thing about their radio and TV broadcasts is that they were in a lovely, very slow way of speaking. They loved that. It was a little bit strange as a native speaker, you know. And I think they had actually stopped doing these for quite some time. I think the special English radio is continuing, but I haven't seen any of these for a while. Maybe if I look around, I might find some more. But they certainly did have other video clips like these. Lesson 1, who are you? Oh, of course, you are American and fabulous. Yeah. And budget cuts, ask a teacher. So in it, of course, very American that, isn't it? Let's see what else. Yeah, new words, illusion, nice, isn't it? Yeah, VOA challenge. And they had their own social media channels as well. So a wonderful site. So if you don't know about this site, please do take advantage of it before it disappears. Yeah, and that's really all I wanted to say about this. Next, we're going to move on to talk about special English, which the Voice of America really was very, very into. Right, let's look at some special English. And you can see here that there is a website. So it says here, special English is a simple form of the English language used by a public radio station called Voice of America. And that was indeed up until today. But as I've been reporting, Voice of America will be closing. Run by the United States government in special English programs every day. Its news and feature programs are read more slowly than usual, using fewer English words and simple grammar. The contents of special English programs are much easier to understand. Special English is clearer and simpler, and it uses shorter sentences. It goes on to talk more about that. Special English is popular among people for learning English. Just so that you know, this term special English isn't a term that we really use here in the UK, because it kind of gives the impression that it's there because you don't understand it. So it has to be made special for you. That wouldn't be something that English culture here in the UK would support. We would call it maybe something like beginner's English, but it wouldn't be classed as special because that sounds a bit too strange. It says here, special English was first used on October the 19th, 1959 by Voice of America. So it seems to be something which was used very specifically by that radio station. It was experimental, as you can see here. They used simpler English within about 1,500 words. By the way, just so that you know, VOA, Voice of America, was the equivalent of the BBC World Service. So that's quite a big issue to take that away. But as I was reporting the other day, if you're following my podcasts, the World Service also, there's big question marks over its funding, whether it should survive, particularly in light of its role with the British Empire. So to be a special English broadcaster, a person needs to do months of training. That includes a professional voice trainer who teaches how to breathe properly and pronounce clearly. Sound familiar? A chief of special English at VOA said people in this country have likely never heard of special English. Yeah, of course. And also said if they have, they often don't understand the significance of it to people in other countries. Um, I- Personally, I think the VOA sounded very patronizing. Hello, my name is, and I'm here today with the news, which you won't understand, of course, because you're not American. No. It sounded a little bit like that. So it used to really upset me a little bit, especially when they were broadcasting on shortwave, because of course, I used to love listening to shortwave radio. And I'd be sitting there tuning in my stations, and then suddenly I would hear, "This is the Voice of America, broadcasting from America, where you are not." Because we are fabulous, of course. So I used to get really upset by that. Um, However, I do understand it was just their way. Um, since 2013, Voice of America has actually been available in America itself. It never was. It was set up in 1946 as an overseas audience. And it's the same here. The BBC World Service wasn't available in the UK, except I think during the night, one of the radio stations started broadcasting it, but it wasn't there for us to listen to at any point until the internet came, and now you can hear all of it. Right, it says here one VOA staff explains that the main goal of special English is for the listener to understand the content. Doesn't that just sound very patronizing? Oh dear. There's a fine line between being simplified and simplistic, he says. Oh, I just know that whoever said that's over the age of 60. So let's see what else they tell us about special English from the Voice of America. Yeah, they're just saying there the things that they put on special English. Right, let's have a look at the Voice of America itself and see when it was set up. And then finally, we'll just have a little look at the news report, reporting the end of it. Right, here we are again. So this time we're just going to have a little look at the Voice of America's Wikipedia page. It's already been updated to reflect the past tense. Voice of America was an international broadcasting state media network which was funded by the government of the United States of America. It was the largest and oldest of the US international broadcasters. VOA produced digital TV and radio content in 48 languages, distributed to affiliate stations around the world. Its targeted and primary audience were non-Americans outside the US borders. It reached 326 million adults per week across all platforms, and it was financed by the US Agency for Global Media. Yeah, so this is important because the US government has decided to take away the funding for this. Okay, and by doing so, it has actually switched off not only Voice of America, but Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia, as well as their supporting websites and platforms. VOA was formed in 1942, and the VOA Charter was signed into law. Okay, that just means it's contract, basically. It was headquartered in Washington, D.C., and overseen by this. Yeah, there we are. VOA had a weekly worldwide audience, we said that already, of 326 million, employed 961 staff, and had a big budget. On March the 15th, President Donald Trump ordered the Voice of America to be shut down, along with all other stations of the International Broadcasting Bureau. Bureau in British English, Bureau in American English, and all of them are placed on leave. Now, I want you to see who or what other stations are part of this. Oh, Radio Sawa, Radio Farda, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia. Yeah, I think that's all we can say there. Yeah, so that was how that was. Very interesting, isn't it? It has a list of the languages here. Yeah, very interesting. So it's just going into the history there, so we won't spend any time going through that. But you can see part of my childhood's been wiped out by the removal of this. Very sad, very sad. So let's look at the news report, closing it, and then we'll end. Right, we are on to our final segment now about the closure of VOA. And we're just going to read through the news story here. It says Trump moves to close down Voice of America, which is kind of sad. It's also kind of sad that the BBC is trying to blame him for this. I mean, he's doing it, but perhaps a more accurate headline maybe Voice America is being shut down, or Voice of America to close, because this story makes it look like all about Trump, which it is, but we don't want to talk about him. We want to talk about Voice of America. So I'm not going to get into the politics of this. I'm going to leave out the part about who did it and just talk about what's being done to use the passive voice. This is a wonderful thing about the passive voice. It helps us to focus on what's happening, not who's doing it. Right, so VOA, I'm going to start on the third paragraph here because you all know it's closing. VOA, still primarily a radio service, was set up during World War II to counter Nazi propaganda. It says it currently reaches hundreds of millions of people globally each week. Mike Abramovitz, VOA's director, said he and virtually his entire staff of 1,300 people had been put on paid leave. He said that the order left VOA unable to carry out its vital mission, especially critical today when Americans' adversaries are creating false narratives. We're not going to get into that because we don't know if that's really true or not. Maybe, maybe not. The National Press Club, I'm assuming that's an American institution, a leading representative group for US journalists, said the order undermines America's long-standing commitment to a free and independent press. Yeah, because it's radio, I'm not sure if it had much of a future anyway, but certainly its webpage and its learning English things were very useful. It says here, an entire institution is being dismantled piece by piece. This isn't just a staffing decision, it's a fundamental shift that endangers the future of independent journalism. Yeah, that kind of stuff, maybe, maybe not, but we're not worrying about that. We're just mourning the closure. Mourning means grieving over VOA disappearing. VOA's parent company, US Agency for Global Media, which also funds Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia, which were set up to counter communism. Americans always hated that, didn't they? That was their big enemy. It tells managers to reduce performance to the minimum presence required by law. And it just goes on to say how they were notified. And this is a bit here. It says the Czech Republic's foreign minister, I mentioned this earlier, that somebody there said he hoped the European Union could help keep Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty running. Radio Liberty, that rings a bell. I want to try to remember that or look it up because I'm sure it runs alongside Free Europe, doesn't it? So they want to at least try to partially maintain the broadcaster's operations. Why is that, I wonder? Why do you think the EU might want to maintain it? Because I'm not clear on why the EU would want to keep it alive unless it has some vital purpose. Let's go on. Voice of America launched in 1942 with a mandate to combat Nazi and Japanese propaganda. Its first broadcast, made on a transmitter loaned to the US by the BBC, stated a modest purpose. And there was another contract in 1976 to safeguard its editorial independence. Yeah, all radio stations are beginning to shake now. I mean, even here, local radio has become something voluntary. It was, when I was growing up, paid professionals that read the news, whereas now it's something you do after you retire. You set up your own radio station, or alternatively, you join a voluntary one, or you just read books for the blind. This seems to be the future of radio because everyone's podcasting. So this is of no big surprise to me. I mean, I would imagine by the time I'm 70, I'll be with my own little radio station listening to classical music, which will, play Bach or Beethoven for half an hour. And then you'll hear me, yes, that was the Seventh Symphony of Beethoven. Yes, very nice indeed. In a very quiet voice before I fall asleep again. This does seem to be the future of radio. So we can clearly see where that's going. And there's a Woody Allen quote that says that if he plays Wagner on the piano too long, he has an urge to invade Poland. It is just a joke, just while we're on this. But my point is this, and that is that radio itself is changing and evolving. So dismantling the US government's international broadcaster is no big surprise, to be honest with you. The same is likely to happen to the BBC World Service. It's not really about editorial stuff, it's more about cash. Although I think there is a huge political movement behind it. It's just kind of like convenient maybe to get rid of it now. But yeah, it's very interesting how this will impact other national broadcasters. One of my favorite ones that vanished many, many years ago was Sweden, Radio Sweden International. They had a wonderful external service broadcasting in many languages. I think part of it's still around, but they didn't close it down saying, oh, we don't like uh, other countries anymore, or we don't like what it's saying about the government. They closed it down purely because no one really listens to radio anymore. It was one of the first ones to go, and broadcasters like George Wood were on there. It was a very, very nice, easy thing. So yeah, this isn't just about taxpayers' money, as the story says. That the way we get our information is changing. So yeah, I think we can expect to see more of this in the future. Well, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this little soirée. Is it the same in France? For an evening party, or this little presentation, I should say, for VOA. Whatever way you see it, good or bad, it was a big part of my childhood, and no doubt a big part of yours too, if you're over a certain age. So enjoy, and I'll be back again next week with another weekly lesson. I'll try and bring you more weekly reporting. During the week, I'll try to bring you some other news headlines just to see if there's any more on this story. And until then, I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye.